we're recording this events, so we will have a recorded version of this for all the participants later on. So if they missed the beginning, they can definitely.
That's perfect. Right. Well, thank you, Daria. Well, let me say at the outset, I thank you, Daria, very much for the collaboration and the fellowship in putting this together. We've worked together over a number of years, and it's delighted to be working with you again. And I'm very pleased to see the panel of experts and guests with us this morning. The intention here is, and last but not least, I also want to thank, of course, the president and owner of the Estonia Piano Factory, Dr. Lul, for being with us today. And I don't want to, without much ado, let me hand over to Dr. Lul to sort of make the welcomes, and then we can get back to the specifics of the program. Dr. Lul, over to you. But we met some years ago. Nice to see you again.
Yes, wonderful to see you. And welcome everybody to this very special seminar, and thank you for your kind words. On behalf of AmCham, I'd like to welcome this very, very important seminar today. I cannot emphasize enough and encourage enough Estonian companies to find the US market, and actually vice versa, for Americans to find Estonia as well. I established my own company, the US distribution in the state of New York back in 1994 already. So in 2 years, it will be a 30-year anniversary. And we have been distributing pianos ever since. Pianos are being dispatched from Indiana warehouse as we speak. Another container is being already on the water somewhere crossing the Atlantic right now. I heard it, we have here people joining us from Philadelphia, New York. Daria mentioned her daughter being in North Carolina. We sell in all of these states, all the way to Alaska. And so why are we there? I was asked to say a couple of words that why is it good to do business there as introductory? And it's easier for me to say that because we actually are there and doing it. Well, years ago when I started there was no European company who was as much willing to focus on the US. And partly because I got a data that the state of California will buy as much grand pianos per year as the entire Western Europe together. So that gives you sort of an idea that I thought, well, why should we focus in Europe, which is primarily the upright piano market, this verticals, which Americans call against the wall, the small piano, and focus where people have big homes, a lot of space, and want a beautiful grand piano. So I cannot imagine that our factory would actually exist today without the US market. We established it in the state of New York. Whether it's the best place to be, I don't know, but that's where I studied. Did my master's and doctorate at the Juilliard School in New York, and so I stayed there further thereafter and established a distribution company there. We are set up with a Chase Bank, which today is the largest #1 bank and reaching all across US. We distribute our pianos with one company. It's a fantastic way of distribution. They're specialized in grand pianos, and they go to all the states. They have their partners that they distribute locally, etc. It's all set up. It's easy to do business in many, many ways. Also finances. Pianos that you see in US and American piano stores are not always owned by the stores, but they are actually owned by finance companies. There is a specifically music industry financing, there is specifically dealer financing available. There is a lot of financing support easily and readily available that can finance instruments for the dealers and cooperate with them locally all across US. At some point, I don't have the latest data, but Estonia became the best-selling European piano in America. We had the best dealer network in America. We attended most of their shows in California, in Anaheim, near Disneyland. And I speak about it and I encourage this because it's still working, it's wonderful, and it's great to do business in America. I hope that this is inspiring. I hope that more Estonian companies would see this world more as not that it's a 7 to 10 hour difference, but more that the world is rather close. We're close, if not by the time difference, then much more so with the culture. Now, in comparison, we also sell in Asia. We have a distribution company in China. There is even a company in Russia who wants to distribute our pianos. And I can tell you, in comparison, all other markets for us are a lot more complicated and difficult. And we're culturally further apart. And we have difficulties understanding them. And they probably have equally difficulties realizing why are we doing and what are we doing. It's complicated to provide after service, good care, that pianos are handled the way they should be and not dropped or not left outside somewhere into rain or sun, etc. These things do happen, and I do have the comparison with other places. Yes, there are single great dealers all around the world. We also pretty soon shipping here in a couple of days to Jakarta with airplane, etc. But still, coming back in comparison with all these decades that I've done this, it's the best place to do business is in the US.
Thank you, Dr. Lull. I mean, you've touched on some very powerful points about the importance of local presence, having a distribution network that is solid and effective, the cultural issues, and the sales and service mentality, and they're all very important elements to having a successful entry into the States. But you touched on many of the crucial points that again will come up, I'm sure, through the course of the next couple of hours with the other speakers. But thank you for that. Is there anything else you would like to add? Because that was all very, very powerful. But would you like to hold it for the moment there, or is it, please feel free to add more comments if you'd like to.
Thank you kindly. I had a little script here to follow that after my speech, I was going to give the microphone to our wonderful Daria. So this is the Estonia team people, the Daria and Marlene, and they both are here with us today. And I have to say, Daria is absolutely fantastic. She's running the AmCham. AmCham is here to support. AmCham is here to find other examples, other companies, network, share experiences. AmCham is here for your good, for our members, and encouraged to join and find AmCham very helpful. And there is no better person to run this than Daria. And here it is, please.
Thank you so much, Indrek. What a kind introduction, but welcome from my side, and a huge thank you to you, Frank, for organizing this and for coming to us with this proposal and for bringing so many great experts today. But also a huge thank you to our local experts who are joining and contributing to the discussion. We feel that it's part of our mission here in Estonia to help Estonian companies choose the US market and go there and meet the right people in order to go there. So this event is spot on for when it comes to our goals, and I'm happy that we were able to bring in some external people who usually who are not part of our network yet, but who are interested in the US market, and hopefully you guys will find it useful. I'm going to turn it over to Frank for the rest of the show because he will moderate the seminar today. But I just wanted to remind you that you can always raise your digital hand if you If you have a question or if you would like to make a comment, because it's an interactive event, so we would like to encourage all of you to be very active today. And I'm sure we'll call on you if we see your hand up. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Frank, and for the introduction of other speakers.
Thank you, Daria, for the kind words. Likewise, well, I very much appreciate the cooperation and the joining of hands together over the last few months to make this all a reality. Without more ado, let me talk about BlueLink Worldwide. I'm the principal of the business, and my avowed aim and mission is really to help European and British companies establish an investment presence in the United States. And to do all of that, I have a very strong commitment to bringing together expertise and professionals who can support all the elements of that mission into the United States, of establishing an investment presence in the States, of which today we have a number covering tax, legal matters, and of course the great state of Indiana as a location for investment is there in a moment to be showcased, but also 2 or 3 case studies which I think will be very illustrative of the lessons that you can learn and the way to go forward in a positive way. So without more ado, if you'd like to just bring my first slide up just to set the stage a little bit before Jan takes over the baton. If you could put my presentation up, to be much obliged, Tara, if you can get that up.
It is up. Can you see it?
Let me have a look. Let me just see. I can't actually, no, I can't see it. Oh, there we are. How about that?
Can everybody else see it? If you can please speak
Yes.
up.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to do. I can't see it, but extraordinary. Let me. All right. Well, let me carry on. You'll have to cue me a little bit there. I'll do this on the. The first slide talks about, if I'm not mistaken, talks about how the significant size of the United States is not to be underestimated, as Dr. Law touched on. It's a massive market, and over 300 million consumers, and it's a very attractive marketplace for doing business. It's a very business-friendly environment, and the fit between Europe and the United States is a very well trodden one. If you go now to the next slide, you can tell what the next slide is, Daria, please. Next slide is up, is it?
Yes, it is.
What is that? What is that? Please just cue me up if you wouldn't mind.
It's the size and the map. And 379 million.
Unfortunate. This. Well, I've touched on that. On the next slide, please, Daria. And what is that?
And thinking regional.
Oh yeah, okay. I think that the key issue here is that not to generalize with about the United States. It's a very diverse and interesting market. You've got lots of different, I say, subcultures by region, from the northeast to the south of the United States. So don't generalize. There are no US stereotype. You need to do your homework, understanding if where you're doing business in the States is a fit for you in terms of business culture and with the local on the ground culture in the United States. Next slide, Daria, please. What is that one?
Talking about the cities and metro areas.
Yeah, well, that's again another interesting point to mention, that people get very attracted to the large metro cities. I've showcased the top dozen or so there, but there are a great number of very interesting, I saw other lower next tier cities that are interesting around the United States. They have lower costs to go to market. The talent pool could be more attractive to you there, easier to recruit. You're not in competition with so many other people. So don't only be seduced by the large cities. There are many locations, and I'm sure Jan will talk about that with Indiana in a moment, how important it is to keep an open mind about where you care to locate in terms of being flexible and open to look beyond the top 12 cities that are perhaps the most famous. The next slide, please. What is that?
And the economy of 4.7 trillion.
Yeah, well, again, we touched on the size of the market. It's a very significant marketplace, and it shouldn't be underestimated the cost of entry, but it is a very business-friendly environment, and the huge marketplace in terms of the global economy. I think 25% of the world's GDP still sits within the United States. Next slide, please.
On the hotspots.
Yeah, these are the various industries that are very, very crucial to understanding. These are from advanced manufacturing, aerospace, aviation, consumer goods, electronics, general manufacturing, digital market, the digital space, professional services. There are oil and gas, aviation, I mentioned that, marine, they're all very dynamic economic verticals in the United States. And if you've got a business, any of these, you'll be well received in terms of the opportunities that can be taken advantage of, because this is where a lot of the growth is being seen in the US at the moment, and has been the case for some time over the last 2 or 3 years. Next slide, please.
A melting pot of culture and language.
Well, then again, also, I touched on this a little earlier on, that it isn't a homogeneous society, and you need to be sensitive to that. And it's not something to be daunted about, but it makes it an interesting marketplace. The language is English everywhere, but there are different cultural sets across the United States. You can't necessarily just lift up your UK or European marketing collateral and drop it into the States. It needs to be socialized. It needs to be socialized for the US consumer, and also reflect regional differences as appropriate. Next slide, please. You're very kind.
Entering the United States, the unions.
Again, here, just again, a point of note is that not every state encourages union activity, and where the unions are strong, you have regulations in place, work practices in place that are require more obligation to be met, whereas other states where the unions are not, they call them right to work states. It's actually quite the opposite intent, really. You can hire and fire, let go of staff very more readily in these markets. So again, if you're looking to set up in the States, it's something to bear in mind. If you're comfortable with establishing a presence where there's a unions are supported, you will have more restrictions on and less flexibility in hiring and letting staff go as needs be. Next slide, please.
Right to work law.
Well, I just touched on that. I think that
Yeah.
it just underlines that point once more. Next slide, please.
And the roadmap.
Well, there we have 12. Then we have 12 steps, if I'm not mistaken, and they're not exhaustive. They're not necessarily sequential, everybody, but they do actually talk about the importance of doing your homework. Market research is an important element at the beginning to establish a robust entry plan. I'm always more than open to being helpful across the board in a general sense, so that the experts will be talking to their specific competencies in a moment. Everything from doing your homework around tax, very important to do your homework on tax before you set up an entity, where you set up the entity, what's the entity structure you decide to set up, requires good legal advice early on rather than later. The same can be made with tax. You need to think about branding and marketing, hiring of staff, and indeed putting in place an accounting system which is compliant with US GAAP rules. And all these elements, many of the experts this morning will be more than happy to touch on, I'm sure, later on in their presentations. But again, I'm more than happy to field questions after the session, Daria, to any of these elements that might be otherwise not touched on by the presentations that come in a moment. So I think that's probably me, is it? I think you've got my picture after that with my details that I do remember. And I think without more ado, I hand over to the next speaker, which is, I think, is Jan, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you very much, Frank.
How did I manage that, Jan, without flying blind there, man?
Flying blind in the presentation was very good, Frank.
I think, meanwhile, you can also go to view on top and just change the view for yourself. I think you might be just not seeing it because of that. But Jan, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Daria, and thank you very much for organizing today's event. Frank, thank you very much for your support and your initiative here. And it's a great pleasure to speak to all of you today about the US market, and to give you an example of how one state, so I represent the great state of Indiana in the Midwest, is handling foreign direct investment from Europe. So with that, we can start my presentation. taking business to the next level with Indiana. So if we go on to the first slide, please, some facts about my state. So Indiana is centrally located in the United States. You can see in this overview, basically the driving distance by truck and by car. So you can reach a very big area of the United States within a 12-hour drive from my state, Indiana. We have a population of rough 6.6 million people. A very high ratio of this population is in the active labor force. We have a very low unemployment rate, as many states currently have. A GDP of 359 billion US dollars, median age of 37 years, and an average per capita income of 45,000 US dollars, just to give you some facts and some orientations, which state I'm representing. Next slide, please. Yeah, in my job here, so I'm based in Berlin, and my job is to take care of all the European companies that have chosen Indiana in the past years and decades, and to assist them with all activities in the US market. That's the one hand side. So we have more than 450 European companies actively invested. But then, of course, my job is to assist, to consult, and to support companies like today from Estonia, if they would like to enter the US market, with practical advice, and to open up my and the state of Indiana's network, how to basically ease the way for you into the American market, to give you good advice, to avoid wrong steps, and yeah, just to have some guidance, especially in the beginning. Main question that I'm always asked is, why do European companies choose a state like Indiana? And I would say, number one, in the past at least 4 or 5 years, was always a great and well-educated workforce. So this is really the main issue right now in the United States. Doesn't matter where you go, to the southeast, the west, to the east, to the north, to find really skilled workforce for your operation if you want to hire US employees. So we have a great source basically in the state of Indiana, a long history of manufacturing, strong in automotive industry, advanced manufacturing, aerospace. It's one argument. Second argument, of course, is low taxes, which is always, at the end of the day, one parameter how you have to choose your first location in the United States, how you are taxed within those 50 individual states. And then, of course, excellent infrastructure. I'll come to this later on, that Indiana is centrally located. We have a wonderful airport. We are close to Chicago Airport. So flying through the United States, but also internationally, is not a problem. And then, of course, the personal support. And this is just to give you an idea. Right now, there are 19 US states who have a permanent presence in the European market in order to really be close to the customer, to give personal support, to make those individual connections, to help with business trips into the United States. And this is all free of charge for European investors. So the Indiana Economic Development Corporation is 100% state-owned, a state-owned agency, more than 65 people in total, 5 international offices where we support all the investors. Next slide, please. Just some accomplishments of our state, basically. So in the overall Midwest, basically, and number 5 on a national base, we are number 1 for business by the Chief Executive magazine. We are very efficient in government processes, government efficiency. So if you need a certain permit for your operation in Indiana, normally this takes in Indiana between 4 to 6 weeks. So compared sometimes to European countries where you need permissions for a production, air pollution permits, for example, can easily take up to 6 months, even longer in some European states. So I think that we are very fast there. We're number 2 for infrastructure in the United States. Number 3 for most affordable states. Number 3 for most affordable states. So what buys you $100 in Indiana is much more than what you can get, for example, in New York or San Francisco for the same amount of money. And number 3 for best business regulatory environment. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is just a first overview, basically, where you can see Indianapolis, our capital, in the middle. And from there, you have different highways going to the northwest, for example, to Chicago, or to the south. So you can easily reach Indianapolis and the whole state with 4-line interstates, which is always an issue if you have production in the United States and you need to move your cargo from A to B. Air transportation, Indianapolis International Airport is the 8th largest cargo facility and is home to the 2nd largest FedEx hub, which is important if you especially have to deliver on time very fast. And FedEx has also just announced a $1.5 billion expansion into our airport. So this grows and grows over the years. Rail connection is also very important if you have to transport heavy goods. We're the first in the United States for rail tons of primary metals, for example. So it's a very good infrastructure also for rail. I talked about roads, water. This is something that most investors are quite surprised in the beginning, that we have 3 international ports that you can use in order to ship your goods and services or to bring parts into our state. And we are constantly improving our infrastructure in Indiana with major investments in order to maintain this great advantage. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of our international airport. Kind of new, it's right now 8 years old. Next slide, please. Yeah, something about our economy. Indiana is very strong in agri business. Also historically, we have $31 billion in, or agri business in total has a $31 billion economic impact. A lot of employees work also in that sector. Next one is logistics, really booming in all parts of the state, as just also mentioned as an example for the airport. Next slide, please. Advanced manufacturing, we are #1 for the global RV market, so recreational vehicles, and 80% of the world's RVs are produced in Indiana. We have several Japanese OEMs who produce cars in our state. We have a lot of European suppliers, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers in the automotive sector. By production, we are the 2nd largest automotive state. And we have a very high concentration, as I mentioned in the beginning, of manufacturing jobs. So a lot of companies who manufacture goods are looking into Indiana. Another sector that is also booming is life science. We're right now #2 in life science exports worldwide, and more than 1,600 companies basically in our state that are constantly expanding. Orthopedics is growing. We had several companies from Spain, from Italy, from Germany, who just expanded to Indiana. Next slide, please. Also, we are one of the top 10 fastest growing tech communities. So Salesforce, for example, just expanded their footprint in the city of Indianapolis. So we are trying to attract a lot of tech companies to our state. And also a very growing sector is aerospace. A lot of European suppliers chose Indiana over the past years because of quite low production costs and the availability of workforce. Next slide, please. 21st century workforce development. This gives you an overview of our leaders in education. So we have Butler's University in Indiana, then the Indiana University, Purdue University, Rose-Hulman, and the University of Notre Dame. And what I'm always trying to do is, if I have a European investor, to make introductions to those institutions, basically to see when they have seminars about how to contact students in an early phase of showcasing your company and maybe hiring them in the near future. Next slide, please. And what plays a major role in Indiana really in supporting national and international investment is the Ivy Tech community college system. So the community college basically is really your hands-on partner. If it goes on the production floor, if you're looking for blue-collar workers on the production floor, then Ivy Tech is your partner in really set up programs that are tailor-made to your company to see how they can support you in the next years in finding the right workforce through the education. Next slide, please. These are my contact information. So I think it's a very, very broad spectrum what the Indiana Economic Development Corporation can do for you, for your company, for your business. Use me, use us as a resource free of charge for all of your questions in regards to the US market. We have good connections to embassies, to visa agencies, to lawyers, to CPA firms, to all different kinds of service providers that can really help you with the first steps in the United States. I'm always willing to get on the next plane, to meet with you, to meet with your company locally, to discuss possible next steps. And if you make then at the end of the day the decision to come to Indiana, this would be my goal, my biggest success coming from such a webinar. But I'm always also there for general questions. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention. And again, thanks very much for organizing this workshop.
Thank you so much, Jan. Frank, I think you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I don't know. I'm just thanking Jan for what a wonderful presentation. Every time I listen to Jan speak, I learn something more. And it's a great state, Indiana, and thank you for showcasing it so professionally. If I can hand on now to Nora, Nora Rothrock, who's the Group Managing Director for US Tax and Financial Services. And we worked together over a number of years. And Nora is an expert on tax, and we'll talk about the importance of having doing your homework and before you land, and when you actually have landed, having good tax support. So over to you, Nora, if I may.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone for inviting me to speak today. Daria, I think you have my presentation.
It's coming up.
Great. So that's me. I'm the Group Managing Director of US Tax and Financial Services, and we're unique in the sense we're experts on US tax, but we're based outside the United States. So that's something where we really understand what it's like for you here in Europe when you're going to the US, because there's great tax advisors on the ground in the US, but they're not often familiar with the international aspects. So next slide, please. So this is just a handy checklist. I looked through the agenda, and I like having a checklist. Our clients find this really helpful so that when you're thinking about going to the US, you can just tick these things off the list and get your team of advisors, and when you talk to everybody at AmCham and stuff, what you're looking for. So I'm just going to zip through this because the last one, of course, is where I'll talk about tax. But the first one is culture, and this was mentioned in the beginning as well. And, you know, Estonia speaks really good English, but it is just a different culture. So sometimes words mean different things. I'm based here in the UK. I'm in Edinburgh right now. The words could mean same English words, but they mean completely different things. It's very funny. And sometimes it's, you know, interesting when you look at someone, you realize they didn't have a clue what you just said. But it's more than that. It's the culture. So a couple things is in America, it's business first and personal later. You get to know people later. So don't be surprised when you start a meeting and they've never met you, but they're just going to zip in. They're also very, and Frank covered some of these things in his presentation, but they're also very literal and very specific. And so that's very, very different from some cultures too. So when you see an agreement, it's got every detail of anything that may ever happen in history. Because, you know, as a society, it's a bit more litigious and legal. So these are things just to remember. The general concepts, commercial agreements you do and everything else are going to be very literal and very specific. Catches people out a lot in Europe who are not so literal or litigious. And that's where the next step is legal. Forming an entity or intellectual property, but it's really these commercial contracts as you start doing business in the United States. You need a US lawyer or a law firm that really understands US law. It's not something, you know, here in the UK, we don't use lawyers nearly as much as they do in the US, but you don't have a choice because it's too easy to get caught out. The systems are very different. And so it's just something to remember, really good up front to get a good lawyer, pay a little bit of money, control it up front, and then you'll save a lot later. The third piece is recruitment, HR, and admin, hiring, compensation packages, everything. It's completely different. And the other thing that happens is that, and there's lots of specialist firms you can get on the ground in the US to take care of that stuff for you, but it isn't, whatever you think it is not the case. And the remote accountability I always throw in is because what usually happens, what we see is a company over here in Europe goes to they start getting pulled to the US because they're making sales to the US, right? You have a website, you have a business, you're selling pianos, you're selling something into the US. And what happens is that you think, okay, I'll get a salesperson on the ground in the US to make more sales before I go over. What happens is that people in the US culturally are all awesome. They can sell anything. They're personally responsible for all of Google's sales last year. And they will tell you this, and they mean this. But what happens is you're sitting over here in Tallinn, and all of a sudden this salesperson goes 9 months and doesn't make one sale. And it's because the culture bridge, or they didn't know your product, or they oversold themselves. But either way, so that remote accountability up front is massively important. So, you know, we find that if somebody goes to the US and helps set up their entity in the US first, and hire somebody on the ground there, then it makes it much easier to have that remote accountability with time zone differences. So that's a really big one. We see it all the time. Sales is almost the first thing you hire, and then they underdeliver because it happens. So lots of things you can do up front on that one to make sure that doesn't happen to you. Immigration, obviously, visas, etc. The borders have opened up again. So, you know, get a good immigration lawyer, and there's several ways you can go over. Location, I'm from California, so I threw in the California dreaming. I'm sitting in Edinburgh, Scotland now, where it is dark and gray. And so these are times you think maybe California would be good. California is a long way from Tallinn. It's a long way from here in Edinburgh, and it's a very expensive state. So you pick your location based on where your customers are, where your distribution networks are, where your talent is. That's the big thing, is where can you find talent? We had a great presentation about Indiana now. That's a state maybe you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. So that's a really good option for you to think about when you're looking to set up. Insurance, US is a high risk place. Insurance doesn't work like it does anywhere else in Europe. So you'll have to make sure you're protected for a variety of reasons. Banking, so you want a bank that can work in high growth transatlantic companies. Not every bank is easy. Banking system in the US is completely and utterly archaic. They still use checks. I mean, it's very strange. They don't do chip and pin the way we do. I mean, it is archaic. So, but if you're on the ground there, you have customers, you have clients, how you take money and how you navigate the system is different. US funding, do your research. So much funding out there, lots of money, but different culture, how you pitch, everything's different. The timing of when to go. So, you know, you probably can't build a business in 2 countries at the same time. So you either go early or go late. So as you're starting off, if you haven't really, if the US is really your future market, then go for it. But we see a lot of people try to build a business here and build a business there, and then neither get the attention they need. And the last piece is tax. There's corporate taxes, there's personal taxes, there's state taxes, there's nexus. It is incredibly complex. And with that, to the next slide. Daria, yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to go through the US tax system on a very high level. It's very complex, but there's some highlights I'll make for you, and then when you apply them to your circumstances, there are questions that you'll need to get answers to. So the US tax system is multi-layered. It's not like any other European country. So there's a federal system, which sits across the top, and kind of like it is here, like it is in Estonia. But Estonia has where corporate is cash-based, so you don't get taxed till you distribute it. That's not the case in the federal system in the US, depending on how you're set up. 50 states. That's been mentioned. Frank mentioned it. There are 50 states, and guess what? they all have their own tax systems too, which means whatever tax you're going to pay at the federal level, you're going to have to add in state tax. This is important when you're doing planning because some states are expensive. There's a couple of states where it's 0, but there's a couple of states which are 11.5%, and there are states with 5 or 6%. So now all of a sudden, if you're profitable business, like if you're starting off profitable, all of a sudden this starts cutting into your profits. So some businesses scale up and they're not looking to make money. So if you're a software business and you're scaling and you're venture backed and you may not worry about profits in the first couple, 3 years, look at a company like Amazon, they didn't make profits for a very long time. So maybe that doesn't matter to you. But most of the businesses I see in Europe are already profitable, and then they go to the US and they pay a lot of taxes. There is also, and some of you are probably already aware of this, sales taxes. So it's kind of like that. It's a similar concept, but it's paid by the end consumer and it's charged on top of what you're doing. Now, it used to be that you could merrily sell from over here in Europe into the US and you didn't have to worry about this. But a ruling came a couple of years ago called Wayfair, which changed that. And that means the concept of nexus and where that sale is occurring now, every state wants their piece of it. So there's thresholds of when you have to start paying it, but you have to start thinking about it from day one now. So even if you never set foot in the United States, but you're selling a product or service from over here, you now may have a sales tax situation to think about into the US. So those are your 3 layers, and there's something to think about. So the next step is going back to taxes for a moment. And these are the pre-incorporation considerations on the slide is, what are your business activities in the US? So if you are now traveling to the US, meetings, networking, sales activities, they're all fine. There's no US tax, implications in that. You can do that. However, the minute you start doing income generating activities in the US. So maybe you're doing personal services for people in the US, or you're building a software platform whose technology is being licensed. You may have a US trade or business and therefore would owe some money on US sourced income. Then you'd have to start filing US tax returns. And there's some issues with that, with how that may work with your Estonia company. So assuming when you're going to the US, you've created a limited company in Estonia, you now might have some issues with this. So that's the time you really, if you're doing income generating activities in the US, it's the time you're going to have to start thinking about getting some tax advice. Tax advice isn't something you can easily do on your own. If you've ever tried to look online at the IRS website, which is the taxing authority, it's not simple. It's one where it's better to get an advisor and start doing some planning on that. If you have a fixed place of business or a local agent in the US, then you may have it a permanent establishment, and that creates another layer of how you may already be taxed, even if you don't officially have an entity in the US. So the next step is, is it time to form a US entity, and how should that sit? So the first thing to think about is, and going back a little bit, the US taxes are more expensive. So the corporate rate right now in the US is 21%, but it is expected to go up. To remind everybody, it was 35% 3 years ago. Think how much more that is than your tax rate of 20% on corporate. And remember, that's not necessarily just cash. That could be just what your profits are. So, and if you add that 21% to a state, which could be 5 or 6%, you're paying more. So it's important to get this tax planning and associating from a tax standpoint, associating where you make the money to where you're going to pay tax, and where you can hopefully use the lower rate in your home country. So when you get to the point where you want to set up an entity, usually I usually see this when you want to hire somebody. I mean, that's when you're going to get an office and you want to hire somebody. That's kind of the time when I usually see that you're going to form a US entity. If you want it to be a subsidiary of your Estonia company, there's advantages to doing that. And then you have to look at the relationship between your your company, your limited company, probably in Estonia, and your subsidiary, which will probably be a C corporation in the US. You hear lots of things about Delaware versus other states. To be honest with you, it doesn't matter which state you incorporate in, because you can do business in all 50 states. So if you form a Delaware corporation, you can still do business in Florida or somewhere else. You are ultimately going to pay tax where you make the income. We usually advise people, look, if you're going to be based in Florida and most of your business in Florida, you can do a Florida corporation. There is no real disadvantage or advantage. Lots of people like Delaware because it's cheap and easy to do, but there's that's where your lawyer will tell you this or that. We don't form entities, but what we do is help describe the relationship between the entities from a tax standpoint. The debt versus equity on the slide just means, are you going to loan company to your subsidiary, or are you going to invest in your subsidiary? So these are things to think about. There is a tax treaty which is good news. There's a tax treaty between the US and Estonia. And it helps a lot, only at the federal level. It doesn't do anything for you at the state level, but it helps a lot. There's certain forms you can file to protect, to get out of certain withholding taxes and et cetera. So these are things, you may have already seen those forms if you're already doing business with the US, but it's important to know the tax treaty positions and take advantage of them. We talk about IP ownership and US transfer pricing, and that is simply, if you have an Estonian entity, you have a US subsidiary, you may be licensing, say it's software, you may be licensing that software to your US entity so that they can sell licenses. The important thing is IP. We always advise, well, almost always advise you keep your IP outside the United States, because again, once you're in the US tax range with your IP, you're going to pay the higher tax rates. And the very last piece, which is super important, is personal tax. So if you are going to move to the US, or any of your top people are going to move to the US, the US is the only country in the world, or pretty much the only country in the world, which taxes you on worldwide income forever once you're in the net. So I'm American and British. I hold 2 citizenships. Even if I never set foot and Frank does too, actually. If I never set foot in the United States again, I'm still filing tax returns. And at times I'm paying tax. And the only way I can get out of that is if I give up my US citizenship. So when you go to the US, you cross a certain amount of days, you're going to be considered a US tax resident. So you're going to be taxed like me on worldwide income. And that matters if you have investments over here in Europe, and those investments may be looked at differently. So for instance, giving you an example, as an American, if I own a foreign corporation, so if I own a UK limited company, or if I own Estonia a private limited company in Estonia, the US now looks at me as holding a foreign corporation. And so I have more forms to file, and I may pay more tax, and they will tax me on undistributed profits. And so it is very complex. So super important, before you make the move into the US, you do a little bit of tax planning for yourself personally and for the company to make sure that you don't get caught out and it's what you think it's going to be. None of those things mean you shouldn't go to the US. It just means it's complex, and like anything else before you leave, it's good to get the facts. So that's the rush through the US tax system, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
That was brilliant, Nora. That was an excellent tutorial. I mean, not only the refreshing our memory about the steps, I mean, some of the overlap with what I was saying earlier, which is great. It reinforces the message, but lots to understand. And as I think the bottom line is, do your homework and talk to Nora when you're thinking about going to the States when it comes to tax or on accounting issues. So that's all very much taken on board, Nora. Thank you very much. Do you want to sort of take the baton on now, Daria, with the local introductions? Would you like to do that, as you know them more? We've got Cato coming on. Sorry, Anna, I think that be more authentic if you introduce everybody from the local perspective, and I'll just step back to for a moment till the Q&A comes along.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you, Nora, for this wonderful, very brief, but at the same time, very informative session. And I know that all of our speakers are open to one-on-one meetings after this webinar and after this workshop. So I know it was a lot to take in from that presentation, but if you guys have any questions specifically on any of those topics, I'm sure that Jan or Nora or Frank, they will all take individual meetings with you as well. But we were thinking with Frank when we were building the agenda, that it would be very useful if not only we hear from the experts we've just heard from, but also kind of get the perspective from Estonian experts and business, I would say our successful members who actually managed to get into the US market, and they're here to share their experiences. But first, I'm going to introduce Kaido Kynäpäs. He's the partner at Sorainen Law Firm, and Kaido has kindly agreed to share with us the legal perspective coming from an Estonian lawyer who has experience with the United States. So Kaido, over to you.
Thank you, Tara. It's really nice to be here, and I'm really thankful that you organized that sort of event. It's really helpful, and so far it has been really interesting to hear your presentations. So can I ask you to upload my presentation? Okay, here it is. So as Tara said, I'm a tax partner with Sorainen Law Firm. We have not expanded to the US yet, so we have offices only in the Baltics. But my purpose of this presentation was to sort of give you a feeling what is the role of local counsels if we assist our clients to go to the US market, and what are the issues we see. So maybe it helps you to prevent some mistakes our clients have made in the past. A brief comment about my background. So here you can see a small picture from San Diego. So I spent 3 months in San Diego last year. I got the honor to be a Fulbright scholarship there. So it was just an amazing experience to see the California, to feel the culture. So I really encourage you, if you want to go there, if you want to do some science, and besides that, you want to have a feeling about US customers and US markets, then apply. It's just amazing. Besides the weather, I mean, there are lots of cool stuff as well in San Diego, so I can promise you that. Okay, but going further, the next slide, I put down some points which our clients think. Obviously, I saw much better checklists presented by earlier presenters, but yeah, this is what we usually see. So obviously, first clients need to understand why they want to go to the market. Do they have a business case? Do they have resources, and so on? So that's not maybe a question to come to see a lawyer with, but starting with where to establish a company, what legal and tax partner to choose, whether to go to Nora, whether to have some law firm, whether to have law firm in California or New York, and so on and so forth. What are the main tax topics and main legal topics you can expect when going to the US market, how to hire personnel locally, and so on. So this is what we see with which our clients need help, and they would start already from Estonia. Obviously, we are not experts in US laws here, but still what we can do as a local advisors, we can map our clients' needs, what they really want to achieve by going to the US market, what is the impact of that to their business, then maybe work out the concept how to enter there. Obviously, we cannot build up like a legal concept of entering the US market through having a company or having a permanent establishment, having sales agents, and so on and so forth. So we can sort of bring the ideas to the table and see where it goes. And following that, we usually help to find a local co-partner who would actually validate the test case client has, or validate our plan we have put onto the table. And yeah, usually then it goes to the hands of US advisors, where we usually assist with the Estonian aspects. So this is what is our work when we assist our clients to go to the US market. But I wanted to point out also some legal topics we see most often, so to speak. So I guess almost all companies who want to go to the US have to address these at some point of time, better earlier than later. So skipping to the next slide, usually the first topic to address is where and what to establish in the United States. So before going to the company registration, you have to ask yourself the question whether you need a company at all, or whether you need local sales agents, or whether you want to just make a digital business there. Setups are really different from corporate, from legal, and from tax point of view. If client wants to have a company, Delaware is still a very popular place to go, but obviously local counselors can give better and more tailored advice on that. So why Delaware still is popular? Well, it has great corporate law and great dispute resolution system. It has its great patenting system and patenting laws. So in that sense, it's maybe from environment point of view, it's quite close to Estonia because we are so small and rather agile. So this is what you can see also in Delaware, but obviously that's not the main driver for choosing the location. Now, besides that, clients need to know what type of companies to establish, or do I need to establish company at all? In US, as it is in Estonia, you can be a sole proprietor if you do a small business as a natural person, but obviously there are its own risks, like not being protected against liability. I think this is one of the major things that Estonians would be afraid of when they go to the US. So we have heard about great court cases and fines and penalties and so on. So maybe this is the reason why it's not so attractive to do business in that form. Then the next logical step is to think about corporations. What kind of corporation would be suitable for me? Either the C corporation or S corporation. These are basically tax qualifications of legal entities, as far as I know, according to the tax code. So we have C section and S section in the tax code, and this is where the name comes from. But from tax point of view, I guess the main one of the main questions to address is whether the US company should be existing or not existing for tax purposes. Should it be tax transparent or not tax transparent? Should it be look-through company or not? And besides that, there are different restrictions for shareholders. There are obviously different costs for keeping up different types of companies. Some companies need board of directors and then the officers and so on. Some don't. So limited liability companies are smaller type of companies, having less administrative costs for keeping up, but still, for instance, if you want to have investors on board, or if you want to have want to give your employees some equity incentives, then it can be more difficult with limited liability companies as compared to corporations. So there are lots of considerations, and this is usually what goes to the table of US counsel to advise on. And besides that, there are also partnerships. There are different types of partnerships. So lots of forms to choose from. So main questions you should think through as a client before going with the question of which type of company I want to have. I think the personal risk, whether you want to have it or not, to what extent. Also, what are the tax benefits you want to use or could use, whether you want to onboard investors or not. Usually Estonians want, whether you want to incentivize your US employees, what the operating costs might be. So these are the topics you should think through before going to the advisor. So going to the next slide, besides corporate topics, obviously data protection is one key topic. Usually Estonian IT companies and IT startups are really eager to expand to the US market, and then they face questions how to manage the data, whether they can have one server in Europe for all the data collected from Europe and US, or should they have two different servers, how the data exchange takes place, whether the data should be anonymized, to what extent, and so on. So this became more topical back in 2020 when European Court of Justice basically abolished this privacy shield in one court case, and this made a bit more difficult to exchange data between Estonian and US corporations. It's still possible, but more difficult. In many cases, you have to coordinate it with the Estonian Data Protection Agency. You have to have more documents drafted to show that you really protect and care about the data and so on. It's usually not a showstopper, but it again takes money. Now, going further, what we can also see, to the next slide, please. What we can also see is if Estonian companies expand to the US markets, they want to incentivize their employees or agents who work on the market. So it's usually about share options. In Estonia, we are very used to have a really simple share option rules, and this is why it's very common to give share option to employees. Basically, you can save social tax when there is a 3-year period between grant of the option and when the employee gets the actual share. So basically, you can pay the salary in shares of the employer. And if there is a 3-year waiting period, it is taxed only when the employee once sells the share, and only capital gains tax applies. You can save 33% social tax. In US, it's quite more complex. So basically, US has two different types of share options called incentive share options and non-qualifying share option. Share options is basically are distinguished based on their tax treatment, and our experience has been that for the companies which have contractors in the US, it's pretty much very close to impossible to get these incentive stock option schemes to become applicable. It can be doable in certain cases, but our clients' experience has been that it has been quite difficult. So if you have local employees, it's easier to have this ICO or this incentive stock option treatment, which is more beneficial. But with contractors, it's not so likely you have it. So maybe this is one consideration to take into account when you choose which type of contracts you would have with US local personnel. Going to the next slide, what we also can see, and this is, sorry, can you go back one slide? Yeah, thank you. So what you also can see is a tax topic. It's legal and tax topic. So question again to the clients is, if you go to the US market, whether you want to have some sort of personnel or office there, or like foot down presence in the US. And the issue, what is created, it's a permanent establishment issue. It quite often comes as a surprise to our clients that the Estonian company can become a US taxpayer in terms of corporate income tax if it has, for example, sales agents in the US. And this is indeed the case. Nora also pointed this out earlier. So this is nothing extraordinary in tax lawyers' work. It's basics, you know that, but clients quite often do not know that. And in many cases, there is not much to do. Basically, what you can think of is what is the function of person staying in the States, should we qualify this person as a sales agent, or can it be a person who has like more preparatory or auxiliary functions, like not the person is not carrying out the core functions of the business, so that might be escape from this permanent establishment status, but yeah, it's always a tricky thing. So yeah, this is something we have also seen quite a lot if Estonian companies expand to the US market, but I think that, okay, I will not establish myself there, so I do not need to pay any corporate tax in the US, but that might not be the case. And going to the last slide, just to, can you please, yeah, thank you. Just to point out what else we can see in which we cannot advise much, but at least we know the issues are post-employment anti-competition. In many states, it's not allowed. I think even in California, it's not allowed. Then ADA compliance, basically, you have to enable access to your website also to disabled people. You have to have different functionality for your web pages. Then fear of civil liability and class actions. Obviously, this brings insurance to the table. It's quite important that you have a proper insurance when you go to the US market. Correct pricing of intragroup services. So if you are not pricing this correctly, you can face tax liability. It's a transfer pricing topic. Then really interesting topic is look-through status under US controlled foreign company rules. They have several layers of these, and basically it means that in many cases Estonian companies cannot enjoy their deferred income tax liability because US companies have to pay tax on the profits earned by Estonian companies. And that's one reason we have quite often seen that IP is taken away from Estonia, because it wouldn't be much point to keep it here. But there might be, of course, vice versa situations. And how to survive legal bills. Estonia is still sort of at the lower end of that, so US somewhat is quite expensive. So this is something you should definitely address before you ask legal advice. That's my experience. Okay, thank you. That was all. I hope you found it interesting and helpful and got some ideas at least to think of before you go to the US.
Thank you so much, Kaido. And you highlighted quite a lot of topics, with all the excitement about the US market, it brings out so many different things to think about. But we also have 3 people with us here today who have successfully entered the market and are here to share their own experience through different angles, and tell you not to fear all of those issues, because they've done it, they've gone through it, they've succeeded. And so I'm very thankful to have them here with us. And we'll start with Oleg Shvaikovsky sharing the experience of Nortal, which is a big Estonian IT company that has successfully entered through Washington State, Seattle. So Oleg, thank you so much for joining. And if we can hear from you about your experience, please.
Thank you, Daria. I appreciate it. And I'm so glad to see many people here. Some of you are already friends during those years. So indeed, I mean, Nortal already did that. And very briefly, this history of how we did that started maybe 2017, what was a year of kind of full of traveling. And I mean, like me personally, if you're traveling bi-weekly between Estonia and West Coast with 10 hours of time difference, I mean, it was just my personal, all the sleeping cycles was just smashed during that time. But we were participating in the first tender, so we started to establish partnerships there, started to network, and very end of 2017, I relocated there, so we established a company in the United States. So we got our first office. We started to hire, we started to grow. So we started to, I mean, the first person we hired was a sales person. And it was, by the way, kind of the absolutely miserable mistake. So it's exactly like what Nora mentioned as well in previous conversation, that it was an enormously expensive person and delivering exactly zero value. So luckily we understood it quite early. So the second person we hired was the HR, because I mean we had an intention or talent acquisition. So we had the intention from the very beginning to start to build our own operation there, and it was essential for us to start to be able to hire on a local market. So we already had first customers, so we had the revenues. We already were able to grow to hire on this market. So 2019 briefly was a year of growth, and the growth was a kind of rather exponential growth, and we start to prepare for our M&A in the United States, what is again typical Nortal's pattern of doing things. So you're landing on some market, you're establishing yourself, you get kind of first understanding of how the local market works, and then when you already have some critical mass of your business company, people, personnel, and so on stage, then it does make sense to acquire somebody, to integrate with your existing operation, and to grow kind of faster from there. So then 2020 was a year where obviously we were growing again. So it was obviously a year of Corona. Absolutely kind of a new experience, and I would say
how to do business in USA. Aga see hakkab varsti juba läbi saama.
Yeah, thank you. So it was a year where our Corona experience was rather positive for us in Nortal, and we've got quite a lot of new experience. I mean, how to establish all your working and delivery process so that that it doesn't matter where exactly you are located. So it was positive experience. And today, the Nortal US is the biggest part of Nortal globally. So it's a very well-established business, very profitable business, growing fast, and doing pretty well. So absolutely doing pretty well. So maybe talking briefly about our key or our keys to open the new market. Let's say it like this. So first maybe is I mean exactly I'm again echoing what Nora said. So it's finding your first customers, or how Nora said. I mean just land or pick your place based on where are your customers. So for us, it was Washington State. For us, it was Seattle. I can talk hours about why Seattle is absolutely amazing place to make business. But I mean, we started to build the relationship. We started to get our first customers residing here still in Europe, but utilizing the partnerships what we had. So for example, one of the most essential customer for us in the US came through the partnership with Canadian headquartered company, Elastic Pass. We had this already quite a long history of successful cooperation with Elastic Pass here in Europe. And through that channel, so we build our first customers in the United States. Then maybe very important is to be successful in networking. And here, in order to build your own network on a local market, I mean, you have to use all the channels what you already have. So we were using kind of the connections from the Estonian embassy in the United States. We were using the connections from the American embassy in Estonia. We were using kind of institution of the honorary consuls, for example. Some of them, like Paul Raidna in Seattle or Alvar Sosar, I still am very thankful for them. So they've done a great job of helping us to network in these markets. And Enterprise Estonia is quite a good channel to use to network. So you're kind of starting to build your own network, but the ultimate goal is that you start kind of have this local feeling of the market, you know. So definitely, I mean, we can consider Washington as a state as a huge place, but during the 3 years what I spent there in the United States, I mean, despite all these Amazons of the world and Microsofts of the world who are headquartered in Seattle, still, I mean, in 3 years, I already had this feeling. I mean, I didn't have the feeling that I know everybody. By far, no. But I already started to meet more and more people what I already know, you know, and that's exactly part of this network, both on customer sides, on partnership sides, on competitor sides, and so on and so on. So I think it's very important to have very clear and to be true to your very clear business model. Like, for example, in Nortel, we had, we decided from very beginning that we will not be playing, say, Eastern European role there. So we will not be dumping with the prices. So we were working on local American prices, having no illusions that in that case, we have expectations like from a local companies and local level of the quality and so on. But at the same time, you're launching some kind of flywheel, you know. So if you're working on a local price, especially if you're working on a higher end of the local price, you're able to hire the best talents in the market. Their talents are delivering the best value, and as a result of that, I mean, customers would like to order more and more for you, and are ready to pay the money to you, you know. And maybe last but not least, by far not by least, is you have to have, say, readiness to respect the cultural differences. I mean, we may want to think here in Europe that we and the US are similar. We are not. I mean, the communication code is slightly different. I mean, there's quite a lot of differences, and you have to have the kind of constant desire to learn, to accept, to learn, and to respect the local culture. Without that, you cannot succeed. Yeah, so it's, generally speaking, it's American market is huge, right? So and it's there's a lot of fears. What I have heard about this, that is, it's so much huge that it's just unable for tiny Estonian companies to take off there. And to a certain extent, that's true. Especially from that perspective, that let's make no mistake. Let's don't have any illusions. In this kind of activities, there are zero romantics, you know. So it's a lot of hard work, what you have to do. But at the same time, even this huge American market, what is huge? It's enormously huge. It's even hard to imagine how huge it is. But it still consists from a bunch of specific states. Right, so each state consists of specific cities. You can, exactly as in project management. If you would like to tackle something enormously huge, decompose that to subtasks. So don't put your goal to be first in the United States, at least on the first stage. You know, so put your goal as just to establish yourself in one particular state, like Washington, for example, in northwest of the United States. You know, so establish yourself somewhere, and once you already got this local feeling, then you may want to start to think about the expanding from there. You know, and in that case, our history, our experience shows that you can do that. Nortel today, as I said, so it's the biggest part of the Nortel. We are today one of the biggest Estonian employers in the local United markets, and so on. You can make it, but just you have to understand it's a lot of hard work. That's kind of very short conclusion from my side. Nadia?
Thank you so much, Oleg. That's very good to hear from you and about your experience. I had a chance to visit you in Seattle, Washington when I was there, and see you in action. Very, very cool what you guys have done there. And congratulations on your big success.
Thank you. And I do appreciate, all your help as well during this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And next up, we've got Meelis Anton, who is with Cleveron. And good morning, Meelis. I know that you are in Texas, so it's quite early morning.
Hi, good morning.
As well. And thank you so much for joining. It's another Estonian success story. Everybody here knows about the company, but if you could tell us about your experience, that would be very interesting as well.
Yes, thank you, Daria, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone today morning or then in the afternoon to the colleagues back in Estonia. So I'm heading the operations of Cleveron here in the States. I've been living in the United States since 2019, and I live in Dallas area. And as the previous people, everyone was mentioning that, US is like an European Union. You can't say that everything is the same in the US. So I can speak from my Texas experience and can really say that the parts of the US are really diverse. One starting story was that when I came here first, and former colleagues asked that tell us about this, the life in the US. I said that I can't tell about life in the US. I can tell where I'm living, and it's just part of the country. A few words about Cleveron, who doesn't know what we are doing. So we are automating the last mile or in the delivery of both parcels and all the logistics and the retail domain. So that's what we are doing, and we have been so far mostly famous for our robotics and stationary technology, and now we are making steps into autonomous vehicles also. Most probably, if you have been in Viljandi or in Tartu, then maybe you have came across our cars driving around in Estonia. A few words about customers whom we have globally, and then we go into US in more detail. So really big retailers like Walmart and Albertsons here in the States are our customers, and we're really working on expanding our portfolio. And how we have been doing this is through partnerships and then partnering with local US companies. So we started out our journey in 2007 with product development, and in 2015 we signed a distributor agreement with one US partner company, and then this resulted in really successful 4-year project working together with Walmart, and everybody knows the company here in the States, and then they are in the retail domain the best reference company which you can actually have. And going into now the topic of partnering with the US companies, I wanted to both bring the pluses and minuses of working with partner companies. We heard about establishing your own presence here in the States, but I take from the angle with partnering. So one really big plus working with partner companies is that they are established already here. They have the connections and networks and people here on the ground who are able to start action and then work right away. And this, especially for our purposes, it was really crucial. Otherwise, starting to recruit people all over the US to do this kind of technology implementation, which we needed to do, that would be really, really tricky to do without the partners on the ground. We have been talking, and then the previous presenters touched upon legal and regulatory aspects. This was also really helpful that the local partner had these bases covered and the capabilities to support us tackling these points. And again, the initial investment part is also important here. Having a large workforce for our purposes, for example, would have required substantial investment in addition to the technology, but into the local workforce here also. On the flip side, there are also shortcomings. And then one key point which I would highlight is that this detachment from customers could occur when we don't establish direct relationships with the end customers and then working really closely together with them. The detachment is really easy to come, and the personal relationships are really important. We were in one of the presentations before, it was mentioned that the US people are first business and then personal talk and pleasure, but it really depends also again on the cultural background, from which area the people are coming, and then establishing rapport with the customers and really understanding them on personal level, and then they understanding you is really crucial, at least in this part where I'm active and working with both local authorities and partner companies here. yeah, you have to be trustworthy person and come over as that. Then the business decisions will start to follow also. That's the experience that we've made. Another aspect with low-hanging fruit here is that as the market is so large and tackling or offering your technology through a partner company, it's easy for them to look for the easy gains, and you have to motivate and build up the structure of your cooperation in such a case that they are really interested in growing the business. And that's also the potential shortcoming that when you as Estonian company don't have this much control over the long-term business growth and everything is going through the partner, that can be in the long run potential shortcoming which you need to address, again working together with the end customers yourself also. I'm also touching upon the cultural differences, and having a person here. Our model currently is so that we are working with the partner companies, but I'm here also locally and acting as a liaison between the partner companies and the company back in Estonia, and really understanding and living here makes a lot of difference. You start to understand the people, how they are thinking, and how the business actually is working. So that lost in translation, I see from my perspective, taking away this lost in translation is really crucial. And now we're in a little bit hybrid model working with the partners, but it has brought a lot of benefits there. The contact with the customers is crucial, and having the direct line to the decision makers, I can't stress that enough, that as Oleg said, also start with, for example, one customer, but really get to know them, and so that they get to know you. A really good example is before the pandemic time, it was really important to take people to Estonia, because then they start to understand from where we are coming from and then what it's all about. And this helps really build a lot of bridges. And on the partner company side, again, our experience and implementing complex technologies, the partners are really valuable asset here in establishing trust, customer trust, that they are really sure that they get what you are promising them. So that's another plus point on working with the partners, and especially the bigger the customers are, the larger the expectations are. So that has helped us grow our business and then continues to do that. So again, in a really limited time, I wanted to highlight the main points and learnings which we've made in the US market. As also Daria mentioned, I'm open to having conversations after the call. So you can find me in LinkedIn, get in touch, and we can discuss all the questions further. Thank you so much for having me, and let's continue into the questions and answer session now.
Thank you so much, Meelis. That was very insightful, and you have a fascinating story. So thank you so much for joining us. And we've got one more speaker, the last but definitely not the least, our wonderful board member, and quite an interesting perspective to share, because he's actually American, but living here in Rapla, in a small town in Estonia, and helping Estonian companies believe in themselves and actually be confident and go there and achieve what they want. So Carl, without any further introductions, I'm turning it over to you to actually give us some of that passion and energy so we can all get inspired.
Hello. So it's actually from Washington, D.C. and Georgetown that I joined you this morning. I should have been in Austin, Texas with Milis, so it would have been interesting to be over there. But yes, my pleasure is to be here together with you guys this morning and afternoon for you. I have to say that it's really cool to have Milis and Oleg talking before me. Two of the big firms that have really planted the flag over here and done made a big splash. So that's pretty fantastic. My story is that yes, I came to Rapla about 10 years ago, and then I started bringing Daytel, the first Estonian IT company, to America before starting my own firm here 2 years ago. But the thing is, this place is amazing. I mean, come on, it's America, right? It's like a lot. It's how do I say this? It's a lot different than I would have thought in the beginning, right? You think, oh, this is going to be like super cool and everyone's going to, be just exploding with energy. But the truth is that they have to connect to you, right? And maybe the biggest challenge I noticed with Estonian firms in the States is this mercenary approach, like send the one guy over to America and he's supposed to like bridge the gap somehow magically between Estonian management and their American clients. This mercenary game is really tough because you're just like, how do you actually bring this American cultural experience to Estonian leadership? I think that it's really important that Estonian leadership is in America regularly and with clients regularly, and that this, export preparedness thing really starts with everybody, from the CEO and top level 3 people need to be in America all the time to really get a taste for what they need to do to get their product ready and then best serve people here. It can't be this, hey, we have something cool, give us money and we're all good. It's all about the relationships. And I mean, I guess that's like really obvious to me, but it wasn't so obvious to a lot of the other people I've worked with in the past. I mean, this is the only thing that matters over here are the relationships. I mean, in Texas, it's more clear than ever, but even here in DC, it's all about your FaceTime with people. And the virus has made that a lot harder. So, it's like if you had relationships going into COVID, you could ramp them up with these stupid calls on Zoom. But starting new things here in Zoom has actually been pretty challenging. America is open for business, so it's a great place to come to right now. It's actually surprisingly easy to wander around and do stuff, unlike it is in Estonia where it's more locked down. So you can still now do these FaceTime connections. I think that it's really important to lean on the network of folks that exist in Estonia. Like we here at AmGM are kind of this like hub of collecting together people. I mean, Kaido was talking about all the legal landmines and death there is to deal with over here in America. I mean, yes, there's lots of legal landmines and death, okay? But there's one thing about America, there's always an answer to that, right? There's always a way to deal with it. It's not like Estonia where like the Estonian Tax and Customs Board is like, here's the rules on page 47, paragraph 2, go to hell. But in America, it's like, all right, here's the rules. Now, what the hell were you trying to do, man? I mean, were you trying to screw us over, or were you like, you just didn't know what you were doing? I mean, like, what's going on? There's a conversation, there's an attempt at resolving stuff. Everything is possible. I think that's really the different approach. In the States, you can kind of maneuver and figure out things, and people are willing to work with you. And as long as you're open and honest about it, and you're like, I'm just trying to figure this out, then anything is possible. Whereas in Europe, it's more like, okay, in procurement, the government wrote like a 7,000 page long specification. You have to somehow check all these boxes, and your response needs to be 7,000 pages long, and you need to have hired at least 5 lawyers. I mean, like, that's bullshit. Like, you don't need to deal with all that crap. I mean, yes, you got to follow your procurement approach here. You need to probably be aware of what the hell is going on. But if you try and work with the procurement officers here, like, you can do anything, even as a one-man show. As long as you are the one man in control of your destiny, right? The biggest thing with doing business in America is that if you're going to do it, like, you need to own it. It can't be that, like, amorphous Estonian company X is like, we want to go to America. And then it's like, all right, Kaido, go to America for us and bring us back money. Like, what the fuck? That's not going to work. Like, this is impossible. Like, they actually have to go and do something. This idea that Estonia is too small and really should focus on local market entry first is I think like kind of toxic. You know, like, I mean, I don't speak. Do Estonians speak Polish or Finnish all the time? Maybe some of them are Swedish. I mean, like this you need like 27 different market entry strategies to do business in the European Union, but almost all Estonians speak English. I mean, the biggest difference you're going to face over here is if someone's saying y'all or yous guys. I mean, whatever, you can figure it out. I think that the biggest lesson learned for me is that you can basically do anything. You just have to try and believe in yourself and believe in your product and what you're trying to do, and lean on other people and ask for help. Americans are willing to help you, and don't be freaked out by anything. But if you don't control it, if you don't have control of all the pieces in the game, don't even do it at all. Don't even start. It's BS. You're just like pissing in the wind, as we say. So you've got to own it. Whoever's behind you's got to own it, and you've got to be willing to really commit some serious mental capital to it. M&A, whoa, advanced stuff. Yeah, Nortels can deal with that. Partnerships, yes, good way to start, right? I mean, okay, that might not be good for long-term growth, but finding someone here who's already doing business in your space and then partnering up with them and, you know, adding value to what they're doing. It's like that old adage, you know, if you're making them money, they're going to make you money. You know, you just got to think about like how you're going to make them money with your product. Going direct to client is tough for Estonians because there's not the sophisticated apparatus to market stuff. You know, it's hard. But if you can go through, you know, like an intermediary, then you can get started, and then you can grow out of the intermediary, right? I mean, it seems like that's what Cleveron might be doing, right? Started with an agent over there, and now Milos is there, right? I mean, I don't know all the story. Maybe Milos has been there the whole time, but you know, it's kind of like you grow out of it. But how do you start in the first place? Yes, Estonia really wants to help. I mean, we had a whole call. What was it, Daria? Like last week or something, and before I left, and it was Team USA, right? And it was like Team USA for Estonia, like 10 years ago, was the econ officer at the embassy. I mean, now there's like this gigantic consulate in San Francisco, gigantic relative to them. There's 3 people. There's James York parked in New York City or wherever the hell he is. And there's all these honorary consuls who they're trying to push, you know, ramrod it down their throat. They have to like, you know, support Estonian business. So you better, you know, go ask them for help. You know, if they're in Texas, you know, email the dude, hey, help me. And if he doesn't do anything, you can email the embassy. So there's a big network. And I understand that Frank Levine, who organized this thing, is definitely got the real experience in helping Europeans get into the American market. So don't be afraid to lean on consultants. That's another important thing for Estonians. Estonians are always terrified of consultants. Do not be terrified of consultants. Consultants are your friend, particularly accountants. But, you know, finding a good accountant, it's like dating, right? Accountants are like dating. Lawyers, it's like dating. I might hate Kaido. I might be like, Kaido, you suck. I do not like you. We don't get along because I'm nuts and you're not. Like, you know, you got to like find the person that you're cool with, who can roll with your weird. And when you know, find the person who roll with your weird, consultants help with that. Like Frank might have a network, right? You could be like, hey, Frank, I'm nuts. I can't deal with anything. Can you find someone who can deal with me because I'm out of my mind? Yes. Or Frank, I'm boring and terrified and afraid of the world, and I don't talk to people. And I would
I'll be delighted to work with you, Carl. Nuts or not nuts.
Carl, I think we've reached the time when
I had loads of fun. Thank you. I'm going away now.
No, wait a second. You can go away because we have a Q&A right now with.
Oh God, let me leave.
So we're going to try to put all of you on the screen and encourage all of you who are on this call to ask your questions. You can ask a question or make a statement or comment, whatever you feel like. But I think that's the time for all of us to network and interact. So
I got one question to throw into the mix, Daria, that maybe people can talk to.
You take over this part.
Well, no, not really. I don't want to do that at all. I'm just happy to sort of join in. Just that one question that everyone can respond to is, where do they get the funding from? I mean, there's another piece of this puzzle that I'm sure Jan will talk to. There are tax breaks in certain states. Indiana has tax incentives, but the overall question is, you know, how do they manage to get? I mean, Oleg, Rasmus, Milos, where did the money come from? How did you make the case to get the investment away? And are there any insights? Because money is a big consideration in investing in the States. You do need to have capacity to make that presence felt with real dollars. So that would be my overarching, to get a conversation going, Daria.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's at least in Northall case. So Northall was from very beginning designed to be a company who is kind of an export company, right? So, I mean, out of existing business of Northall, I mean, from Estonian market, we're getting kind of 15%, no more, 1.5, right? So all other business are coming from the United States, from Germany, from Finland, and so on and so on and so on. So in Northall, it's quite natural to expand to other markets, but you're absolutely correct, Frank. So I mean, it's you have to formulate a budget, you have to ask for investments, you know, and you have to prove your performance during that journey. So that's absolutely normal way of doing business, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you want to? Are you still with us there? Yeah, no, I can't.
Yes, I am, Frank.
Lovely to see you. Would you like to make any comment on the tax breaks that Indiana can offer? Because I think it's quite a material aspect.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is always an important issue for most European companies. What kind of support they could get from local institutions, counties, states, federal government. And so what I can normally say is it's always depending on the number of jobs and the total investment that you're going to make in the United States. So if I have a project here and they're telling me, well, in the first 5 years, we want to hire in total 50 new employees, these are the wages, and we're looking for a financial investment of $10 million, then it's a little bit easier for us to make a calculation and to get you and to get some tax incentives, even cash incentives. And then if we're talking then to the individual community, to the locals, basically to the county, they are often willing then to chip in, for example, with free land or with a building that is reduced in price or with a property tax abatement for 5 years, for 10 years, things like that. And so what I normally say then that the tax accountant really has to make the calculation, what is best for the company. But I think that really these state and local incentives should be the icing on the cake at the end of the day. So a company should make their decision where their customers, where their employees, where can they generate the best growth over the years. And so incentives is great to take into consideration as well, but it shouldn't be the main driver.
Thanks, Jan. Thank you.
And to chime in from my side is that another really important part is the business which you want to get into. One is software. There are certain things, but when you want to implement some certain technology, then also the rules and regulation in certain areas are totally different. Certain states are more open to certain technology and then really are embracing this technology. So that is also one important thing to consider. We, in our case, for example, with autonomous vehicles, are currently working through this, and there are really big variances in from state to state.
Oleg made mention, Daria, that he had a bit of a disaster with the first hire. How did you get around that? I know there was some mention that you'd hired an HR person to take care of some of these software issues, but how did you not repeat the same misjudgment about recruiting a person that wasn't going to deliver the business for you?
Well, I think that the reason why we quite quickly realized that this first sales guy was absolutely disaster was that we had some certain performance indicators, right? So and it's just kind of, it's quite easy to measure. I mean, are you doing well or you're not doing well, right? So with what comes to the talent acquisition person, what was our second hire, and it was a successful hire. So there was just kind of the absolutely normal and understandable desire not to pay enormous amount of money to the agencies, right? Because it's kind of 1/3 of the yearly annual salary, so 1/4 to 1/3 to pay for each hiring process. I mean, it's just bloody expensive. And we knew from very beginning, so all the process was designed so that we were building the local company, you know. So not company based on expats who we are kind of bringing from Europe to the United States, but local persons who are we hiring locally. And up to so far, I mean, so this United States of US organization of Nortel, it's less than 10% persons, people in the office. They are kind of expats from Finland, from Estonia, from other European countries. So predominantly majority of them are local guys there in place.
Thank you.
Everybody, I've got to go. It was really cool to blow up everything. It was fun. If anybody has anything you'd like to connect with me in Rapla, Estonians, I would be super duper thrilled to chat with you. It's cool to see Indiana state flag back there. Like, it's amazing all the tax incentive stuff you can get. If you've just got the investment you can bring to America, gosh, if we could find Estonians who can make investments of more than $1 million, it'd be a miracle. It's like a lottery in itself. Oleg, you were the man for that. Good job. Goodbye, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Are there any more questions? Do you have any questions on the chat line at all, Dara? We want to sort of air before we. I think we're running to the 2-hour point almost. I don't want to be respectful of everyone's time. So anything else?
Yes, we have 7 more minutes, and so far I don't see any questions in the chat room. So please do speak up or raise your digital hand if you would like to ask it, or just speak up. Actually, it's quite casual. So.
Maybe I can draw Nora into the picture in one more. Nora, I'm always amused and perplexed about the differences between the sales tax regimes, and I think that you touched on it in passing in the middle and the end of your presentation. But how when do you actually start paying sales tax? Because people tend to overlook it as a material issue, and can get surprises when the thresholds are met and how they're met. And would you have another minute to spend amplifying on that?
It's done on it's even more complex. So there's 50 US states, and then sales tax is done by counties. So I think there's about 3,000 different sales tax counties in the US. So every county and then going up to the state has different thresholds or different points where you have to start paying sales tax. Now, remember, in theory, you're not paying it, your end customer is paying it, but it means you have to collect it from the end customer before you can pay it, or you'll end up being out of pocket. So as you start what we tell everyone as you start making sales in the US, so even if you're sitting in Estonia, you have a website, you're starting to sell products and serve, mainly it's products, but if you're starting to ship products over to the US, and you have customers there, you have to start keeping track of where you've done it. Or if you know you're selling it, then if you know you're going to have so many sales in a certain state, or a certain county within a state, then you should start keeping track of it. It's pretty easy to research what the thresholds are in the various states and the various counties. We almost always recommend that you use a specialist software for sales tax because it's so many little counties. But anyway, and it's about Nexus, and that is about where you sit. So, in the beginning, if you're just starting to make a few sales, if they're relatively small ticket items, you don't have much to worry about. The thresholds tend to be about 50,000 US dollars up to about 200,000, but it changes all the time. All the states, post-pandemic, are like every government now is trying to get money. So the thresholds keep moving. So that's something to look at. But it's basically the end person that's buying it from you is the one that you have to collect that from. And every county has a different rate. So in California, for instance, there's several different rates. LA County, Marin County, all these counties have different rates. It's a strange one because if you cross a county, you can get the same item cheaper. I mean, if you're a consumer. So.
Thanks. More reasons why they need to talk to you, Nora, about tax planning when you're doing it.
Sales tax is an interesting one. That's for planning, and then we give advice on that. But like I said, we almost always recommend just using software for that one because it's not something that it's too granular, and the software is easy enough to use.
Thanks, Nora. Thank you very much. Daria, back to you. Are we getting? Would you like to air any other points?
I think that I've just put in the chat that please feel free to follow up with your questions. If you have any questions, you can always send them to us, and we'll forward them to our presenters, our experts today. If you'd like to connect with any of them personally, also let us know, and we can just put you in touch for further discussions, further questions. And I know that our wonderful panelists, Estonian companies who are working in the US, they're also your support network. So if you need to maybe pick their brain about any of the stuff that you're dealing with, I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you as well. If I'm not right, Melis and Oleg, you're nodding, so that's great. So I think that today it was, somebody posted here in the chat room, it's been a very useful workshop. So many topics have been raised, and I think that, of course, it's difficult to educate everyone about the United States in 2 hours, but at least we could connect you with the right people to dig in and actually learn more about this. Thank you so much for finding the time to come out and present today to the companies in Estonia, and we hope that it was useful for everyone. Yes, I guess it was based on the comments. Indrek, do you have any final words before we close out?
Let's have it again.
Well, just in closing, Daria, I'll be in the neighbourhood probably with Jan. I think we'll be in the Baltics in April, and if we could somehow make a personal trip across to Estonia, if people want to chat to us in the meantime, we'd love to speak. Zoom or Teams to keep the conversation going, and that we all would. Myself and Jan and Nora are very pleased to. But I might well be in the neighbourhood in early April. So if there's any merit in meeting face to face, that'd be my pleasure. I'm sure Jan would feel the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful to see you, Frank, here. You're most welcome.
The first cup of coffee is on me.
And as far as the local Estonians, I've been told several times that we need to repeat over and over and over again until we get so sick of this message. Then it's going to have some stronger resonance around Estonia, that more companies should be encouraged to do business in the US.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for being so evangelical. That's very kind of you.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you so much, Nora, Jan. Thank you, Kaido, Oleg, Melis. Carl has left already, but thank you all, and until next time. And I think we're finishing just on time, and wishing you a wonderful Friday evening and a great weekend ahead. Stay safe and healthy. That's the main thing
Thank
right
you.
now. And hopefully talk to you soon.
Thanks, Daria. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.